Hello, welcome back to my channel. So today I want to go over how I prep my files for printing. So last year I decided to start doing art fairs and I had to learn a lot about the printing process. I found this actually a lot more difficult than I thought it would be. The biggest issue I ran into was if you print your images directly from your computer with no adjustments, just how you edited them, they will be dark. The reason for this is because your monitors are backlit, and so the image appears brighter than it really is. So there's several adjustments you have to make to prepare them to send off to the printer so that they print correctly with the correct proper exposure, the proper highlights, the proper colors, and all that stuff. And so I would recommend learning how to print your photos. So a couple years ago, one of the local camera stores here in Seattle, every year in November they have some sort of like a big sale for the weekend, and they had these printers on sale. It was like 50% off the printer and then another 50% off of that price from the manufacturer. So I was able to pick up a printer that can do 13 by 19 paper, and I gotta say, when I first printed, my images were absolutely horrible. I didn't realize how terrible my editing was until I started printing. So that's the biggest advantage of printing, is you learn a better editing technique. Learning to edit for print is a lot different than editing for, say, social media or just for your phone or whatever you use it for, right? So it takes a lot more steps. You have to be a lot more meticulous. You gotta focus on any sort of dust spots. You gotta focus on any sort of haloing, anything like that, because it will show up in the final print. So just make sure that you really zoom into 100%, maybe 150%, and study your image. Make sure there's no imperfections and all that. It'll make your images 10 times better. So I just want to go over in this video how I prep my files for print. You may print them differently, and if you do, go ahead and leave a comment on how you do it. It'd be great to hear other people's perspective on this matter, because everybody's going to do it different. There's 100 different ways to do this, and so this is just the way that I go about doing it. So the first thing I do is, a few years ago, I bought this Spider 5 monitor calibrator, and this was a game changer. So what I found was, when I first started printing on paper, was when I printed from my computer, the colors of the print were different than what I saw on my computer because it was uncalibrated. And so once I did that, then what I saw on my computer was the same as I saw on the printer, except for the exposure. The exposure was usually dark, and like I said, it's because your monitor's backlit, and so I had to learn that. So this Spider 5, I'm not sponsored by anybody. I bought this on my own several years ago. This is an old one. I don't even think they make it anymore. I think there are 4 or 5 versions above this now. So, but I would imagine there's other companies that make them as well. This is just the one my local camera store had, so that's just what I use. And I try and do it about once a month, just so that as I edit my images throughout the year, I know my monitor's calibrated. And it does have a little warning. My computer sends me a little warning, hey, it's been, a month since you last calibrated. And so then I'll just do the calibration right then and there, and then I can start editing my images. And so after that, after everything's calibrated, let's go ahead and jump into my computer here, and I will show you how I prep the files for print. So this image here, this is Blacktail Ponds. These are the Grand Teton Mountains in the background. Unfortunately, Grand Teton's covered up by a cloud there. But the early morning light sunrise was just awesome that morning, just dusting all these trees and the bushes, and then the contrast between the yellow and the blue of the river and the blue of the sky. So this is my finished image. This is what's on my website as it is, right? And so if I want to send this off to the printer, what I want to do is I want to come down to the soft proofing button and then hit I use the YY so that it compares. So this one on the left is my original image, and this one on the right this is actually set for Lumichrome acrylic. So if I was to send this off to the acrylic printer, this is how it would look. And so now I need to edit this image to match the one on the left. But let's go ahead and change the acrylic. So go Adobe 1998 RGB. If you're gonna print on Chromolux metal, you want to use the Adobe RGB 1998 profile. And so as I'm doing more and more printing, then my final edit step is to like open up a brightness layer in Photoshop and increase the brightness by like 20 to 30. That usually gets my image really close to how it should print, right? And so if you look, if I toggle this on and off, okay, let's just pick something here. So if I go back to like Lumichrome, it's way off. If I go back to Adobe 1998, you can see it's relatively close to how my image is edited and how it looks on my website, right? So what we want to do is match the right one to the image on the left. And so you can see down here on the left, I have two. So this one is a virtual copy. This one of two is my original file. I never touch that file. And that way, if somebody orders this as an acrylic, okay, I can open up this file, make a virtual copy, edit that image as an acrylic, right? Or if they want a paper print, I can edit that as whatever paper. I use Hahnemühle Burita, and I can edit it to fit that ICC profile. And so I have this virtual copy, and that's the one I'm editing. And so you can see they're relatively close. The shadows are a little darker, the sky's just a touch darker. And so let's go into the adjustment tab, and let's boost the exposure by just a touch. All right, it's like 0.25. That looks really good. Well, let's see, how are my shadows? Let's zoom in. Shadows look good. So if we zoom in here, yep, those are, so you always want to zoom into everything, and how you can make sure your exposure is correct. So that actually looks really close. You can see all I did is bumped up the exposure. So if you wanted to, you could also bring down the highlights a little bit. That way you know when you print it, then the highlights will still be detailed, just to make sure. But that looks really close to my original image, right? So from here, let's go up. We'll hit the export. And so the way I like to save these is I name it what the image is. So this is Blacktail Pond Sunrise. So let's go Blacktail Ponds Sunrise, right? And then since it's the Adobe RGB 1998 profile, I'll put that in, Adobe 1998. And that's kind of all I do. And then that way I know that one's set for that profile. So if I was to go in and do a Lumichrome soft proofing, then I would type Blacktail Pond Sunrise Lumichrome. And so from there, let's make sure, so it's a TIFF file. It saves it in the same folder as the original. Come down here, color space. We want to make sure this is set to 1998 so that it saves it in that profile. And I think everything else is good. 300 pixels per inch, no watermark, no nothing. So let's go ahead and hit export. Okay, then once Lightroom's closed, then I'll open up Photoshop. So let's go ahead and open. Okay, so here it is in Photoshop. So this is the 1998 RGB profiled image. And so if you come up here, you can see, let's see, edit, go down to convert to profile, and it should be, oh, so this one is still set at that. So let's change that to RGB 1998, somewhere in this list of generic profiles that Photoshop has. So let's go, let's see, somewhere up here. Oh, here it is, Adobe RGB 1998. So that way you know that the profile of the image when you send it off to the printer is set to Adobe 1998. Like I said, this is assuming you're printing on Chromolux metal, because that's the profile that the Chromolux metal printers use. All right, so let's go ahead and make a copy. So I'm on a Mac, so it's Command J. On a PC, it's Control J, I think. And then what I like to do is, I've seen some photographers not do this, some do. I like to upsize the image to whatever size I'm printing on. And the reason that is so when I go to sharpen it, it's sharpened for that size. Because I found if you sharpen for whatever size this image is, then you send it off to the printer, you didn't realize that by sharpening, you created halos. Let's say I want to print it 30 by 45, right? And so what I'll do is I'll come into image size, width, or height, right? So let's go height, because it's a landscape format. We'll go with 30 as our height, and we'll hit OK, and wait for the image to upsize. And the reason I like to do this is because when I go to sharpen the image, then it will sharpen the proper size. And I found if I try and sharpen the image without being upsized, then I don't see all the issues that sharpening can bring in, right? It'll create halos, it'll create weird artifacts, it'll just kind of do weird things to your photos. And so by upsizing first, then this is the size the image is going to be printed, and then I can look around on this image and see if there's any problems with it. Okay, so we are at 30 by 45 image size, and then there's multiple ways you can sharpen, but the way I like to do it, because I found this just works for me, and I come into Topaz Labs and then Topaz Photo AI. So I've tried this Photo AI on quite a few different things. Like they say it can like sharpen your images if it's out of focus. It can do a bunch of things, right? Denoising. It seems to create a lot of artifacts for me, and I just don't really like it for anything other than what I'm going to use it for here. And so the one on the left is the original. The one on the right is the image I want to sharpen. The image is going to go for print, right? And so what I'm going to do is come down to sharpen the subject, because I don't want to denoise. I don't want to adjust all the lighting, just sharpen the subject, right? And then up here, what I'll do is I'll just hit all, right? Because I want to sharpen the entire image, not just, as you can, if I went to subject, if you can see here, see up here in the little right corner, apparently it's only going to sharpen the cloud. That doesn't work. And so let's go down to all. It'll sharpen all of it. And so what it does, you have all these options here, right? And these are just the standard default settings. So if I zoom in, you can see like it refocused it to strength 18, denoise 42. And you know, look right here, see how chunky that is? So you really have to be careful with this software so that it doesn't do that in your image. You can see just how terrible that is, right? So if you go to standard, it goes strength 38, and that's even worse. So what I found is I'll go to natural, and you can see it goes strength 14, minor denoise 42. So what I'll do is I'll bring denoise all the way down, and I'll bring my strength to like, you know, 4 or 5, just very low. And then you can see it enhances it, it sharpens it, but it doesn't leave a bunch of artifacts. Just sharpens your image. You know, if you still think it's a little too sharp, you know, go ahead and bring it down, say to 4. So it's just very minor adjustments. And so I never use the default. Then we'll come up here to the edge of the mountain here. Let's see, so if we keep, so like here, you gotta be careful of if there's gonna be artifact or a halo that happens right through here. You can see it does a really good job. There's no real halo or anything, but it sharpened it. Denoised it a little bit. You can see it's just 1 because that's as low as it'll go. But it didn't have all those artifacts. Like if we, let's boost the strength up to like 38 again, and you can see it just gets horrendous. I mean, could you imagine printing something like this? Oh, look at that, just the halo up here, the sky will turn all chunky and gross, and so, like I said, I keep it around between 3 to 5 for my sharpening for my image. Like I said, this is sharpened at the 30 by 45 size. There's no denoising, and there may be a little bit, like I said, whatever it does naturally. And so from there, go ahead and export to Adobe Photoshop. Okay, we are back in Photoshop now. You can see as I toggle this on and off, how it's not super sharp, but just sharp enough. Then you come up to the edge of the mountain, off, on. But you can see there's still no real halo, and this is at 150%. You know, if you zoom in more, you can see, oh, there's a little bit of haloing right here. But the thing with that is, I never want to sharpen my sky. I never want to sharpen the clouds, the sky, because they just kind of start to get chunky. And so with this, because it doesn't have to be that exact, I'll go up to select sky and just create a mask. So you can see we have a mask there, general mask, right? And so, but that did the opposite, right? So you can see as I hold option and click the mask, so it did the opposite of what I want. So we'll just go ahead and hit Command I, then inverts it. And then if you zoom in, then you can see that, you know, the sky is no longer sharpened. So you can see as I toggle this on and off, the sky doesn't change. So you could do, if you want to refine that a little more, which I usually do just to kind of make sure that nothing is haloed. So I'll hit the brush, the B for the brush, to highlight on my mask. Hit B for brush. Okay, so I have the brush tool. I don't know why it's flashing in and out. Maybe because I'm screen recording. Then I'll just kind of, oh, make sure it's a soft brush. I've got a hard brush because I've been working on a cityscape here. So let's go ahead and undo what I touched on. So you can see I've made that really hard right there. So let's go ahead and hit X to change it to white from black. And then we'll make the brush quite a bit bigger, and then we can just kind of brush that in like that. All right, now let's hit X, go back to the image, stand on the mask, and then we'll just kind of brush in around the edge of the mountains. So fortunately, because there's so much clouds, the edge of the peaks aren't going to be a main focus for anybody looking at the image. You know, most of them are going to be focused on the trees, this little river, and then look at the mountains in the background, right? So now if we open up this, you can see it's like it's got the entire edge in. So now if we zoom in, you can see we've gotten rid of any sort of haloing on the edge, but everything's still sharp. You can see even the mountain, you know, turn this on and off, you know, it's sharp, but there's no weird artifacts, no real halos. Now what I want to do is I really want to focus on the sky. And the reason we do that is we look for any sort of dust spots, look in the clouds, look for any issues with your sky. Dust, oh, no, that's a mountain. I thought that was a dust spot. Because those, when you print, they will stand out like a sore thumb. So just really scan any part of your image that is smooth. Like if there is a dust spot down here, wouldn't even see it, right? So there's no reason to focus in on this. I mean, you still want to focus in on here to make sure you're sharp or make sure there's no, like, something ugly in the image that you missed. I'm going to keep that duck in there because he actually is fairly sharp, but we'll just keep scanning a little bit here. Unfortunately, when I shot this, there was no moose or bear roaming through the scene. There usually are, especially if you go there in the winter time. There's moose and elk and all kinds of stuff everywhere in this area. So we'll do now, let's flatten the image so that there's only the one layer, right? And then we'll come up to edit, make sure convert to profile, make sure we're still in Adobe 1998. Then we'll go ahead and save it. So you hit save as. And then what I'll do is, now I have the file name as the Adobe 1998, I'll add the size to my file name. So I'll say 30 by 45. That way I know what size this image is and how it's ready to print. You can see here, embed color profile, Adobe 1998. So go ahead and save that. I use a Mac, so I'll just hit the Mac, no image compression. Go ahead and save that. And so there's two ways you can do this part. So I've done it both ways in the past. I get the same results. So if you want to go with a smaller file, you can hit save a copy and then come down to JPEG, because you're still in the Adobe profile, right? The RGB 1998. And the image is a 30 by 45. So I'll get rid of this copy here because that's just how Photoshop does it. Then it's got .jpeg, right? And then I'll hit the save and make sure the quality is on maximum, 12. Then I'll save that. So I've sent the JPEGs to the printers, 36 by 72 for black and white, you know, but because I've upsized the image, I've done all the work, it's still in the profile of what it's going to be printed on, then it doesn't really seem to matter if I send the file as a JPEG or a TIFF. So that's up to you how you want to do that. It's still a very large file if you send it as a JPEG. It's not some like 2 megabit file. In fact, if I open it, go ahead and find the file here. Where was that? Where did I take that? Oh, Jackson Hole. Jackson, June of 2024. And it should be, here we are. So if I can down here, so let's see, so here's the JPEG file. If I hit get info, so we're still at 118 megabytes as a JPEG because it's a high resolution JPEG. And so you may run into people have a hard time downloading that, you know, the TIFF file, because if I do the TIFF, if I can hit get info, You can see it's 729 megabytes as a 30 by 45 image. It depends on how your print shop uses it. And so that's the process I go through for prepping my files for print. You know, I check the profile, I soft proof it to whatever I'm printing to, whether it's Lumichrome acrylic, Chromolux metal, or the hand annealed paper. It's, you know, I upsize it, I sharpen it, I calibrate my monitor. So there's a lot to just printing an image. It's not just, oh, edit it and print it. There's a lot more to it, especially if you're trying to get into art fairs and it has to be a quality image. Look for any sort of problem with it, you know, dust spots, scratches, you know, anything. Look for all that stuff, spend the time. If you can, get a small printer for your home and learn how to print on paper to get started. That's a big help. Otherwise, you know, just enjoy the printing process. Take the image, edit the image, print the image. It finishes off the work you have put in. I think all photographers should print their work. That's just my opinion, and I am an expert on my opinion. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Ring my bell. I do have my Oregon workshop still set up for the Oregon coast in October. You can check that out. If you're still interested in infrared image editing, I've got my tutorial. So all that stuff's linked in the description. So like I said, hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.